walk into this room at your own risk, because it leads to the future. Not a future that will be, but one that might be. This is not a new world. It is simply an extension of what began in the old one.
I didn't think you had it in you.
I'm your huckleberry.
I was born into a system constructed for failure. It's a sinking ship being manned by drunken sailors. And escape artists behind the bars of a jailer. And the spark attack and they withhold the inhaler. If the shoe doesn't fit, what good is a tailor? In the midst of this crisis, please cancel the gala. Without a symphony, there's no need for a prelude to foreshadow what's to come. See, the secret committees commence with their meetings to make red tape in response to simple questions. Questions threaten the perception of a beneficial system, a pyramid scheme with its cogs and its pistons. Organization of man, making more and more living a miserable existence. How can someone contain so many victims? This begs the question. My rest is a weapon against the oppression of man's obsession.
My conscience is captive to the word of God.
Come on, freedom is yours by right. It's in us, and in our actions on this day.
I cannot and I will not recant.
All right. Welcome, beauties and beasts, ladies and gents, to another episode of Roundtable Media, where I'm just doing my best to pull the cover off of what's going on around us and to lift up the exclusive name of Jesus, who is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And it is by his sovereign rule that we can be very hopeful to stand in confidence to go out and expose the works of darkness. Ephesians 5:11 says, have nothing to do with the works of darkness, instead expose them. So we can go out and look at things that are going on and dig into what that is. If something's true, that truth belongs to Jesus, and it's worth talking about. So what we're going to do is go through frame by frame of the video of the shooting of Alex Pretti. And we're going to discuss the chaos that it's caused and a lot of the unrest and dissent, of course, within the specifically the conservative movement and the way that people are approaching this and seeing it so differently. It is not surprising that people are standing with ICE on this. It's just very disappointing. Very disappointing. So we'll start out here. We're going to look at my front page on Facebook and look at a couple posts and what people said. And then I've got a PowerPoint that we can go through, and then we'll look at the videos. We'll look at some statements from some authorities, including Trump. And you have to bear with me a little bit. I don't have the most pro setup here where we can just quickly share a screen and people helping me and all that stuff. So it will be a little bit of a delay between sharing screens and stuff like that. But first off, let's go ahead and look at some of the things that was said here. And I want to make sure it's the right one. Here we go. Okay, so this is the front page of my Facebook here. And this is a meme I shared. It says, when you realize MAGA would have cheered for the ATF at Ruby Ridge and Waco. Now, what this is a bit of a trigger meme. It's a shocker statement that is intended to get the conversation going. And as it often is the case, instead of starting a conversation, it just causes vitriol and knee-jerk responses from people, but let's look at a couple things that people said to this. A friend of mine, Daniel, said, "That's untrue bullshit. They were on their own property and were not obstructing lawful detention." Now, he's referencing Ruby Ridge, and I would point to the fact that as far as law enforcement was concerned at the time, he was, in fact, obstructing their lawful detention, their sting that they created for him when they had a man approach him to cut off a shotgun, and he actually refused and ended up doing it. Anyway, I know a lot about the history with him and what was going on and what he was doing, and he was actually taking the gospel to the Aryans, and there's a lot there. If you remember, Congress completely exonerated him, so he was not lawfully, he was not truthfully obstructing lawful detention, but that's certainly what they thought at the time. Then Daniel goes on to say the effing narrative is a lie. Now he's referring to Pretti, and I would agree. The narrative from authorities is in fact a lie, as they called him an assassin, said he was there to commit bodily harm against ICE, and that he shouldn't have been carrying a weapon and things of that nature. So that certainly was a lie. I'm not sure what the narrative he's talking about there, but maybe you have let something inside your belief window that has you changing into a leftist. My guess is a deep resentment of the Jews. It's difficult to see how you could extrapolate a resentment of the Jews from my standing for constitutional rights. I'm not sure what he's pointing to there, but then changing into leftist, that's not surprising. When people stand up for constitutional rights, that is often the charge. Again, not surprising, just disappointing. My whole point here is to stand for constitutional right, not to take a political side. My loyalty rests with Christ and the freedom he's given us, the principles drawn out of Scripture upon which America was founded, not to some president or political agenda. Okay? Someone says you're way off on this, apples and oranges. Is it apples and oranges? I think we'll see as we walk through this that the man's constitutional rights were grossly violated, which is what happened at Ruby Ridge and what happened at Waco. Gary Denley says, Dan, I believe you're just looking for a fight. Not true. Absolutely not true. It's just stressful, man. And I'd rather just have a good day. But these issues come up, our country's being splintered, and I think it's important to speak into the fray. I want people to think rightly, to see this for what it is. I want people to be brought to justice who have, violated people's rights. So where's the gospel in this meme? So again, as I started this out, I said that if something's true, that truth belongs to Christ. We can certainly talk about the gospel, and then we can talk about events like this, and we hopefully look at that through a biblical lens. Okay. And he said some more stuff there. Darren Corrales says, I'm curious, can you have voted for Trump and not be a MAGA? Well, sure you can. I did. I voted for him. And I don't consider myself in the MAGA movement. Do you think there are those like myself, a Mexican American, who are sincere and not racist Nazis, that are okay with the deportation of undocumented people of all shades of color and ethnicity? Sure. Yeah, of course. Again, so you can love ICE. You can hate the immigrants. That's your right. Go for it. But what we're talking about here is the right of an American to carry a weapon, to film our public officials in the course of their duties, and to not be subjected to gross illegal search and seizure. Okay, so we stand for the individual right. And there's a bunch more stuff. I encourage you to look into auditors and those who watch law enforcement like lackluster. In this video here, there was a man that was tased, and he was actually a vet suffering from PTSD. He was just standing out there, and people were voluntarily giving him things. He wasn't asking for things, but They tased this guy. He had a service dog. The dog ran off and ran over. It's very sad. Things like that. But get into the First Amendment auditors like Sean Paul Reyes in Long Island Audit, and Zach over at Liberty Troll, and Bay Area Transparency, and I Am Free, and those guys, because what they're doing is a good service for this country as they film our public officials and, of course, their duties. And it's important that they also adhere to the laws that they are sworn to uphold, right? ICE is not the end-all be-all of the law. They're not a law unto themselves. Okay. So I have this PowerPoint. Let's get into that. And that is right here. Okay. The Alex Pretti killing, constitutional and tactical analysis. Fourth Amendment. Okay. Incident overview. Alex Pretti, an ICU nurse and lawful gun owner, was tackled and killed by federal agents during an immigration enforcement operation in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Video and media analysis questioned the government narrative that he posed an imminent threat. Now, I don't know if you have seen the video and the statements being made by certain officials, namely Trump and others. Check this out.
Oh, is there one number that's bad? There's not one.
Do you agree with the assessment from some of your own officials that Alex Pretti is a domestic terrorist or an assassin?
Well, I haven't heard that, but certainly shouldn't have been carrying a gun. But hey, look, bottom line, everybody in this room, we view that as a very unfortunate incident. Okay, right. Everyone, right. Unless right. you're a stupid person. Very, very unfortunate incident. I don't like that he had a gun. I don't like that he had 2 fully loaded magazines. That's a lot of bad stuff. And despite that, I say that's a very unfortunate.
You said that you are the de facto president of Venezuela. I don't know. Okay. Maybe you were joking with.
Now, one thing about Trump is he just says so many ignorant things sometimes. He just says whatever rolling around in his head. And here he blunders into the statement that you ought not be carrying a gun. Well, I don't know if you checked the Second Amendment last, but it says that you have every right to carry a weapon. We all have the right to go out armed. Now, we don't agree with Alex Pretti's worldview, his intent, his motives. Well, let me be careful. His intent was, by all general purposes, looking at the video, to film the ICE agents, which is well protected by the First Amendment. Okay. But I would not say that he was very bright in strapping up that day and going out to where the federal agents were, right? So one could argue that based on that decision he made, he lost his life. Okay, but we still have bad actors. We still have a bad shoot that we need to talk about. Okay, so when Trump says that you ought not be carrying a weapon, he is going directly against the Second Amendment. Not to mention when he says, we shouldn't have been carrying 2 mags. I think he says clips. That's actually a magazine. But many of the guys I know will tell you that you're doing it wrong if you don't have an extra mag with you. Okay. So that right there, ignorant on its face. Let's look at another one. Here's Kristi Noem. This is something. This is something here.
An individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently. Fearing for his life and for the lives of his fellow officers around him, an agent fired defensive shots. Medics were on the scene immediately and attempted to deliver medical aid to the subject, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect also had 2 magazines with ammunition in them that held dozens of rounds. He also had no ID. This looks like a situation where an individual arrived at the scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement.
Man, I mean, wow. Okay, so I'm trying to put myself in the framework of those that agree with all this. We could say that he showed up with a weapon, okay? But the way that she says this in this hyperbole is to say that he showed up brandishing the weapon. Okay, there are other guys that did say he brandished the weapon. He never once had the weapon in his hand, as we will see. He only had his phone. Okay, and then she makes the statement that he was there to commit maximum bodily harm. You have no evidence of that whatsoever. She, of course, brings up the magazines. Again, you can carry an extra magazine. You can carry a weapon and not be considered someone who is going to harm another person. That is lost on the left, certainly has been in years past, and now it seems to be lost on those in the MAGA movement, right? Very, very disappointing. Again, not surprising, but disappointing. For the federal government to come out and make such abjectly false statements, such as when she said that they were firing defensive shots. No, they weren't. No, they were not. Absolutely were not. Okay, so before we get into the actual video, let's see. I had a couple other things to share here from what people have said. Oh, this one here, Bovino. I understand he's now no longer head of ICE, but he was. This is pretty disgusting here. Let's watch this.
It looked to us from every angle, sir, that he was approached by them when he was helping another individual who was pushed down. What evidence do you have that he was assaulting any law enforcement?
Dana, we don't need a suspect's help in an active law enforcement scene.
When you say suspect, what is he suspected of?
That's an active law enforcement scene. He knew that was an active law enforcement scene, especially when the officers approached him, and it's very evident he did not need to be where he was.
When somebody is pushed down and a person's instinct is to help that person, when somebody's pushed down by law enforcement, you're saying that you just stand back and let law enforcement do what they're doing?
You know, Dana, every situation is different. What our officers are faced with here in Minneapolis are chaotic, very difficult and violent situations in which individuals, and this suspect is not the only one to bring a loaded weapon to a riot. The situations are chaotic and ever changing. Follow directions for law enforcement. Don't inject yourself knowingly beforehand into a law enforcement situation.
With respect, it feels as though in some ways you're blaming the victim here.
The victims are the Border Patrol agents. I'm not blaming the Border Patrol agents. The victim are the Border Patrol agents. The suspect put himself in that situation. The victims are the Border Patrol agents there.
I just want to also go back to what I was asking about with regard to what Secretary Noem said, that he was brandishing a gun. At any point, do you have any evidence that, yes, he had a gun on his person? Was he brandishing it?
We heard the law enforcement officer say gun, gun, gun. So at some point, they knew there was a gun. So again, that is going to be part of that investigation as to what was happening on the ground there between those victims, the Border Patrol agent victims, and the suspect.
It looked to
Okay. So I think what really bugs me the most is he's trying to call ICE agents the victims. I don't know. I can't imagine someone agreeing with that. But I'm sure there are those that are. We got a public chat here. Somebody said sup Dan, but I can't see. Oh, hey, what's up, Liberty Troll? How's it going, Zach? Good to see you, man. Glad you're there. I just plugged your channel earlier, said that people need to start watching more First Amendment auditors so that they can get a grasp of these things. Yeah, so for those of us that appreciate filming and open air events, this is very disturbing. As someone who's been involved in open air preaching and evangelism and filming, this is very concerning that people would back the killing of this man when he was just there filming the law enforcement, right? But what we have here is a political environment where people are watching this, and I don't know, you're concerned about losing the primaries or something, and your political views are clouding your judgment. I don't care about the primaries. My loyalty doesn't rest with the guy in the White House. Matter of fact, his loyalty is to me. His loyalty is supposed to be for the things that we voted for, right? And I stood on principles that led me to throw in with Trump at a certain point during the election. And the attempted assassination was what really kind of put me over and thought, man, maybe he really is a stick in the craw of the beast. And the whole time I was saying I could be wrong. And I had so many debates. I had friends that were so mad and basically unfriended me for throwing in with him. But since he came on the scene, I didn't trust him at all. I was a big Ron Paul guy, and I just saw Trump as another one of the big money men in the scene. But as time went on, he impressed me. I mean, he kept his promises, and then when he left, that was brutal. And as a business owner, I saw a lot of downturn, and of course with COVID and with Biden, it was absolutely brutal. So yeah, a lot of people were excited to get him back into office, and I was one of them. But I regret standing with him in many ways. I think he's really shown his colors. He has not done and acted like what we wanted, whether it's war, exposing Epstein, and other things. It's just been very, very disappointing. But that said, I mean, we've also seen reforms that I appreciate. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm a reformer. Voted for reforms. We got some reforms. Great. But the current track of the nation with him at the helm is a little concerning, to say the least. And what we've seen from ICE is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. We're going to go through some of that. We're going to go through the fact that they have now violated 96 court orders. ICE is in violation of, just in the month of February alone, or January alone. We're going to look at that briefly too. And the things that they have done is just unbelievable. And this shooting of Pretti is what we call a bad shoot. And it's lost on me that so many smart thinking people are willing to say that it isn't, that it's a good shoot, or whatever they're saying. And this all stems from your need to, be right about immigration reform. Now, here's the thing. I am for getting the illegal immigrants out of our nation. But this isn't about immigration. This is about the violation of someone's rights. When it's you can be for immigration reform and also be against the violation of someone's rights. I don't know if you know that or not, but you can. And many of you may not realize that what they're doing isn't even putting a dent in the millions of immigrants that came into this country under the Biden administration. They're not even hitting a fifth of it. I mean, Trump came out and said, we're not going after the illegal immigrants per se. We're going after the more hardcore criminals, those that have committed further crimes, because you're a criminal if you've come into the country illegally right out the gate. But then there's those that are very dangerous, face tattoo, gangbang criminals. That's bad. I'll tell you, I was raised in agriculture, and we used to hire migrant workers, and we had the same guys every year, and they would show up, they would work harder than anybody else we could hire, and then they would go home off season, live like kings, and then they would come back. When I was young, they were illegal. I remember immigration coming out to the farm, and the Mexicans running out into the desert and hiding. They'd scoop up what they could and take them, and then those guys would be back in a few weeks. Eventually, it was criminal. They created penalization against those that would hire illegal immigrants, so they had to get their green card. So they got the green card, and things were good. They taught me Spanish. They made their homemade tortillas. They were in many ways part of the family. I mean, I also remember my grandmother doctoring the leg of one of the guys who had gotten in trouble with a criminal coyote that had been trying to kill him, and he had to run. He cut his leg really bad, and we fixed his leg, and I remember that. We provided work for those guys, and they went home, and they come back for work. And so that's an experience that I have a category for migrant workers that I believe is sound. But I also stand against the rapid influx of illegal immigrants that are just here to freeload, given a free ticket to go whatever, and stay at a 3-star hotel and all of that nonsense. And they have stolen billions, really. And when they actually use different, they steal people's social security numbers and things like that. They bring the wages down, things like that. So it is a problem. We just would like ICE to abide by the law, and we've seen them act in ways that says that they feel they're outside of the law, right? And so this shooting was things kind of culminating, and I think we're just seeing things come to a head, and it's a good point to discuss these matters, because that was indeed a very bad shoot. So before we continue on that, well, here, let me back to the PowerPoint. Okay. Key questions. Was the use of deadly force objectively reasonable under the Fourth Amendment? How does the totality of events test apply here? Does the alleged misfire of the Sig Sauer reduce or increase officer liability? Okay, so what are we talking about here? The most important question is, was their use of lethal force reasonable? And to understand that, you have to take in the totality of circumstances, not just a freeze frame event. So we go with everything that's happening there. And one of the things that's interesting to point out is there was not a mob. There was no mob of people there. That's been brought up offhandedly in some of the news clips. It was just a few people, and they were blowing whistles, which, again, blowing a whistle is protected under the Second Amendment or the First Amendment. So it may be annoying, you may not like it, but they have every right to blow a whistle. They have every right to film those guys in the course of their duties. Now, the alleged misfire. So Alex Pretti had a Sig Sauer on him, and we're going to go through the video. One of the agents takes the gun away from him, turns around, and the thing goes off in his hand. Sig Sauer has made this P320 that has the potential to misfire without a trigger pull. They say that that's not possible, but there's a number of YouTube videos, guys test these things out and they go right off. We're going to get real up close on the video and see that the action slides back. So it's a pretty good analysis that gun went off. And he could have pulled the trigger. He was carrying it kind of up like this. So I don't know. But does that increase or reduce officer liability? Okay. Keep that in your hat. What's the next one here? Legal framework. So there's a case law, Graham v. Connor. We're not going to read it. Encourage you, go study it, look it up, do your research. I'm going to tell you like the atheists tell us Christians, go research. I'm not going to answer it for you. Go read that case law. But Graham v. Connor, excessive force claims during seizures are judged under the Fourth Amendment's objective reasonableness standard. So, and then courts must consider the totality of circumstances, not one frozen frame in time. Okay, so we're going to look at was there excessive force through illegal search and seizure, and did their shooting of him stem from objective reasonableness? Okay. Before we want to look at this, we're going to look at a clip here from Sean Paul Reyes before we go to the video. We're going to get to the video. I really encourage you to go check out First Amendment auditing if you're not doing that already. And check out Sean Paul Reyes and Long Island Audit. He's great, man. He's so good. And he's right here. He's going through some things. Let's just listen to this right now.
And other lawsuits that were sure to result. Respondents have continually assured the court that they recognize their obligation to comply with court orders and that they have taken steps to ensure that those orders will be honored going forward. Unfortunately, the violations continue. The court's patience is at an end. Accordingly, the court will order Tom Lyons, the acting director of ICE, to appear personally before the court and show cause why he should not be held in contempt of court. The court acknowledges that ordering a head of a federal agency to personally appear is an extraordinary step, but to the extent that ICE's violation of court orders is likewise extraordinary, and lesser measures have been tried and failed.
Okay, so real quick, this is from Judge Schultz, that was a judge appointed by W. Bush, and he has given court order to ICE to appear in court, and they continue to violate these orders. 96 court orders violated in January alone.
So he entered an order based on the foregoing and on the filed records and proceedings herein. It is ordered that the court will hold a hearing on January 30th, 2026, before Chief Judge Patrick Schultz. Respondent Tom Lyons, the director of ICE, must appear in person to show cause why he should not be held in contempt for violating the court's January 14th order. Petitioner's counsel may participate in the hearing, but his attendance is not required. If before the hearing, the parties file a stipulation indicating that the petitioner has been released from custody, Juan, the petitioner, has been released from custody, the court will cancel the hearing and will not require Lyons to appear. So that's where we were at, right? So then another order takes place. And so what the government does, ICE does, is they get this order and they're like, oh, well, we don't want the ICE director to appear before this court to show cause. So they let Juan go, right? They let him go. They release him. And the judge is like, okay, well, that's all fine and well. And he issues an order. He cancels the hearing as he promised. He cancels the hearing. And he says, that does not end the court's concern, however. Attached to this order is an appendix that identifies 96 court orders that ICE has violated in 74 cases. The extent of ICE's noncompliance is almost certainly substantially understated. This list is confined to orders issued since January 1st, 2026. 96 court orders in the month of January. I mean, I thought we were supposed to be, when you call me the traitor, I want the government to be held accountable, checks and balances, that's in the Constitution, right? Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. Article 1 is the executive, Article 2 is the legislative, and Article 3 is the judicial branch. I think you're inserting your own politics into what my mission is about. Go read my about section, right? It doesn't mention, Republican or Democrat or any sort of politics. It mentions standing up and standing firm for the Constitution of the United States and for the people of America and our country, and the laws. And the supreme law of the land is what? The Constitution of the United States, right? Anyway, this list is confined to orders only in since January 1st, 2026. And this list was hurriedly compiled by extraordinary busy judges. Undoubtedly, mistakes were made and orders that should have appeared on this list were omitted. This is very important here. This list should give pause to anyone, no matter his or her political beliefs, who care about the rule of law. ICE has likely violated more court orders in January of 2026 than some federal agencies have violated in their entire existence. ICE has likely violated more court orders in the month of January 2026 than some federal agencies have violated in their entire existence. The court warns ICE that future noncompliance with court orders may result in future show cause orders requiring the personal appearances of Lyons or other government officials. ICE is not a law unto itself. ICE has every right to challenge the orders of this court, but like any litigant, like me or you want the government, you want a government agency, really? Because you want illegal immigrants out of this country. And guess what? That's not my argument. You want illegal immigrants out of the country? I believe in the rule of law. If they need to be deported because they are here illegally, they should be deported. Full stop. If you're here unlawfully in the country, you should be deported. But that deportation should be done lawfully and constitutionally. That's my opinion. That's my stance on it. And again, that's not a political stance, no matter how much you want it to be. ICE is not a law unto itself. They have a right to challenge all these orders if they want. But ICE must follow the orders unless and until they are overturned or vacated. Juan asked the court to schedule a hearing on which he may be presented evidence and argument concerning the hardships that he has suffered. Okay. Based on the foregoing, he canceled the hearing. This is this judge right here. Again, I've already seen the comments and he's a DEI liberal activist judge. That's Patrick Schultz right here, appointed by George Bush. Just to give you context. So now I've been getting a lot of criticism when I started speaking out against the unlawfulness of ICE.
Okay. Good for now. So I wanted you to see that and have that in context as we go through this. They're already out there violating so many things, and people have really no clue how bad it is. But even when some of that, I think, rolls across the desk in front of conservative, it's like, nah, whatever. We got a problem and they have to deal with it no matter what. No, not no matter what. They still have to follow the law. And I'm telling you, when somebody's rights are violated like that, it's just further quarter for those guys to get worse and worse. What happens when the next administration gets in and then they want to go and wring the vitriol out of the government as much as possible against their political enemies, right? We don't stand up for what's right now. What reason, would you expect someone to think that they need to stand up for your rights later? Okay. And so the reality is with regards to immigration, they're not actually doing what you think they're doing as far as getting all of them. It's a very minuscule amount. And they're doing it brazenly. Now, we can talk about how they're being attacked, and there are instances when the public is coming out and coming at them and attacking them, and so I agree that is bad, and so those guys are going to respond. But when it comes to someone who is not attacking them, who is only filming them, then they still need to respect that individual's rights, even if they had an incident where someone come at him. I mean, it was pretty evident that he was just standing there filming them. So we're going to go ahead and watch the clip. And what I'm going to do here is X is extremely good for finding things that present alternative views than the dinosaur media. I love X. There's a lot of good people on there, a lot of good content. There's still going to be disinformation and stuff. But then again, you use your head, vet the sources. We have the most powerful form of media ever at our fingertips, and you ought to be able to vet information. I like to go to 2 or 3 places to do that. Let's go ahead and share this screen, and we'll just start here. So so it's been brought up 11 days earlier. Alex Pretti was involved in another incident where he did come at him, and he kicked the vehicle they were in, and the tail light came off. So that was strange. I'm having to replace my headlights right now, and there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of little screws and bolts and clips and things that have to come off before the whole assembly comes out like that. So I thought that was interesting. And by the by, you might be interested to know that the incident of Pretti, Good, and George Floyd literally is within like a 2-mile radius. It all happened within a 2-mile radius there in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And Pretty Good, Floyd. I don't know. It's just interesting if there might be further subterfuge going on there that we can't see. I'm not going to get into that. There are actually guys that do and come up with all kinds of clandestine conspiracy stuff with that. But it is interesting. I will tell you this. I was I took a class once on human trafficking, and it was extremely intense. And this was years ago, before a lot of things have been exposed. But I went through that, and man, it was a gut churner. And we watched a lot of things. We read a lot of books. And one of the things that one of the experts said was that the hub for human trafficking is Minneapolis, Minnesota. The hub of human trafficking for this nation is Minneapolis, Minnesota. So when we take into account the Somali fraud and everything, and obviously it's not just the Somalis, there are government officials involved in that, billions of dollars being funneled away from this nation. I think it was equal to the entire GDP of Somalia, the amount of money they took. And that's why we're seeing so much impediment to getting anything done, is because there are government officials involved with that. And we don't know to the extent of just what kind of wickedness is happening there in Minneapolis. But I don't think it's any coincidence at all that this is where we're seeing all of this ferocious fighting and events. And additionally, I will give you this. I will say that because the local law enforcement is not helping in crowd control, we now have dead people. From what I understand, most states are cooperating. But there's a lot of events where ICE has done just some very egregious things. I mean, have any of you seen the one where the priest is out there talking to them and pleading with them? They're on a roof, and they fire I think it's a gas grenade down on him and hit him in the head. That was pretty bad. And they laugh. They clap after they killed Pretti, which is interesting. We're gonna see that. Let's watch some of this. This is X, and this entire feed here has a bunch of videos, and we're just gonna kind of watch some of it and see where it goes from here. That might just be a picture. Oh, but look at this here. So this picture, now this guy brought this up in Congress here. This picture, which I shared, and there he's got his beard on. So everyone says that this is an AI video or picture, and I don't know why. Because this is a still frame that, if it is AI, it's literally identical to the still frame from the video. So I don't know what, there's just more misinformation, and people come out and start arguing about this being an AI photo. In fact, it says it right here. This isn't a meme. A sitting U.S. senator printed off an AI photo of a headless ICE agent. Now, it might appear that that's a headless ICE agent, but it's not. And as we'll see in the video, that is exactly what happened in the video. So just more misinformation. Okay, so here's this one. This is nice slow motion here. Let's back it up. Okay. So here they've already maced him, pinned him to the ground. Now this guy right here, he's going to take the gun out of his holster. This guy, so what has happened is they or someone has seen the gun, and they all yell, gun, 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 and they spurg out by seeing it. And I think this guy's drawing his gun right when he sees it, but this guy has already taken the gun away from him. Okay. Now, this guy here is the guy that took his gun, and we'll see angle from the other angle. We'll see video from the other angle. He's turned around, and for all general purposes, I'm pretty sure that Sig Sauer goes off accidentally right here, and then they all shoot him. Okay, so here it is. Okay, there's the video, guys, and there's the still frame, and there's your headless ICE agent. Okay, let's back it up. Okay, you see his head, you see his face. He's got a scarf or a mask on here, and watch it come forward. Okay. Now there's the video, and there's the picture. Okay, I'm not gonna. Yeah. So this is real. This is the video. It's not an AI picture. All right. Let's let it finish. Okay. Okay, so now we have let's get one from the other side. Okay, here's another video. Stop fucking hitting them! Stop! Tell your fucking boys to stop! Now,
I'm standing as far.
now you can see this guy is pelting him in the head, and I think what he's using is the mace can, and he's just decking him in the head.
I'm standing as far.
And that's what this video is showing. Okay, so maced, pinned, beaten at this point. Okay. What I want to find here is when he first comes up. Oh, okay, here, let's look at this one. Okay, so this is where the SIG goes off. And I'm not sure if this is the one. I have another one that might be more clear, but that action slides back. It's not as clear here, but it's pretty clear. We're pretty sure that gun goes off. And then they all participate in what's called contagious fire. Okay. Okay. I had the video of where he approaches him.
With a federal agent. The officer pushes him.
Okay.
And he steps backwards. Christy Noem.
So
the first video we have of Alex.
This is BBC. But now you can see he's just standing there. He has walked up. He's been filming them.
Pretti. Okay. He's in the road, holding a phone and talking with a federal agent. The officer pushes him, and he steps backwards. Christy Noem is U.S. Homeland Security Secretary. This is her account of why Alex Pretti died.
An individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently.
But in this video, as in others, Alex Pretti had nothing in one hand, a phone in the other. We see two people interacting with an agent. We then see an agent push one of those people, then push the second person. Alex Pretti steps between them and the agent and is pepper sprayed. He's wrestled to the ground by a number of agents. He's on his knees, bent over. His hands are on the floor, and he's struggling against being held down. One agent repeatedly strikes in the direction of his head. And take note of this agent. He has nothing in his right hand, reaches down, and removes what appears to be a gun from Alex Pretti's waistband. Then he steps back, holding the pistol, which appears to match this image shared by the authorities. Carrying this type of gun is legal in Minnesota with a valid permit. The police say they believe Alex Pretti had one. Less than a second after the gun is removed, an agent fires the first shot. As Alex Pretti lies motionless, further shots are fired while agents are standing clear of his body. In total, 10 shots were fired in 5 seconds. In all of these videos, we don't see Alex Pretti holding a gun. But once more, we have seen an American killed in the street by federal agents.
Okay, so one of the things here is that the agents push that woman, okay? When it comes to arresting someone, it sounds like this: ma'am, put your hands behind your back. So I don't know what the intent of that officer was, but he shoves her, and I think we can all agree he didn't have to do that, right? Okay, so he escalated the situation. He shoves her once, and then he shoves her again to the ground. Now, it looks like those two might have been with Alex. I don't know how you were raised, but, you know, when a woman is attacked, it's just kind of knee-jerk reaction to help, right? Now, Alex did not go to attack the agent. He turned around and goes to help her off the ground. And then for some reason, they just all pile on him. And they mace him. They mace everybody there. And Pretti is trying to help that woman. they tackle him, put him to the ground, pin him to the ground, and shoot him, unloading 10 rounds into him. The last 6 rounds they load into him while he is prone on the ground. Okay. I don't know about you, but where I come from, that's wrong. That's just gunning down a human like a dog in the street. So this is what we call a bad shoot, and it's bad for everybody involved. And those agents, I think, are already being investigated. I know they've been pulled from duty, and they are going to. I think they actually have termed this a homicide already. But I thought I had a close up of that gun going off. I guess not. So let's go back to the PowerPoint here, and we'll get through it. So bear with me just a second here. And we'll get into it. Okay. Next slide. Severity of the suspected crime. These are Graham factors. So we're drawing from case law, and we're going to plug this scenario into those factors. Whether the suspect posed an immediate threat to officers or others, the most important factor. Whether the suspect was actively resisting or attempting to flee. Okay, he had a phone, he was filming, and then he walked away from them. So that is not posing a threat to them or anyone else. He was not resisting. Law enforcement loves this term, and it's ambiguous a lot of times, but he was not resisting. They never told anybody they were under arrest, for one. They shoved people to the ground. Okay, he wasn't attempting to flee, of course, since he was maced and pinned to the ground. Next, the totality of circumstances. Doesn't matter. Courts increasingly reject a narrow moment of threat only view and look at the full sequence of events. That includes how officers approached, escalated, disarmed, restrained, and then fired. Now, I want to go back to the question of whether or not you think that the accidental discharge of that 6 hour helps or hinders their case of the agents. And the fact is, it hinders it. It hinders it because it points out a radical lack of training and awareness by these guys. And they got caught up in something called contagious fire. And in all kinds of training material, this is condemned as poor, improper, and wrong. So what the video shows, an agent reaches into the scrum, removes a handgun believed to be Pretti's, and walks away holding it. A single shot is heard, then other agents fire a rapid volley of shots into Pretti while he is on the ground. Okay, the 6 hour. Pretti's gun appears to be a 6 hour P320 type pistol, a model tied to lawsuits alleging discharges without trigger pulls. 6 hour denies true spontaneous firing and maintains that discharges occur only when the trigger is pulled, even unintentionally. Again, as I said before, there's a number of YouTube videos where guys set the gun up on a vise and they show you how it goes off spontaneously. Pretty frightening. I would say don't buy one. Negligent discharge versus bad gun. Analysis suggests the first shot likely came from the agent holding Pretti's gun, not from Pretti. In slow motion, the slide cycles as the agent moves, consistent with a negligent trigger pull while handling the weapon. Now, the reason that this is a hindrance for the case of the agents is because it was the agent holding the gun. So the gun was not in Pretti's possession. He did not fire the round. There was no reason to shoot him. Contagious fire. Once the first shot goes off, other agents immediately fire multiple rounds into Pretti. Research on contagious fire shows officers are far more likely to shoot after hearing nearby gunfire, even without confirming a specific threat. Man, that happens when you're a knuckle-dragging buffoon. But for those of us that are more aware of our surroundings, can handle adrenaline, we don't get caught up in contagious fire. I don't know how many times I've heard you weren't there, you don't know, and stuff. You know, that's fine. That's fine. But the video doesn't lie. And I do know I've been involved in a number of things that cause high adrenaline. And I feel like I'm capable of handling that to an extent. I've not been in combat. I am an avid reader, and I've read a lot about combat, about warfare, which is not the same at all. But when it comes to these guys in masks and badges, they are required to have the training necessary to allow them to not get caught up in contagious fire, to be able to handle events like this and not react improperly. They have all the weapons, they have all the training, they're supposed to be capable. Training and tactics problems. Proper training requires finger off trigger, muzzle discipline, and independent threat assessment before firing. Firing simply because another shot was heard is wisely described in training literature as negligent and avoidable. Guys, I mean, killing a visibly identified protester in these circumstances where he appears to have been trying to help another person, that amounts to retaliatory state violence for engaging in protected speech and protest activity. Some of the comments online from ICE agents, I've seen them say, stick your head up, put your head up, and you will be, I can't remember exactly how they worded it. Put your head up and you'll be taken out, along those lines. And then another thing they've been doing is for those people that are filming them, they are putting them into a national terrorist database just for filming them. That's bad, guys. That's real bad. Applying Graham to Pretti. Severity of offense. No clear evidence Pretti committed a violent crime or fired at agents. Immediate threat. If he was disarmed and pinned when most shots were fired, the threat was minimal or gone altogether. Resistance flight. No evidence he was fleeing or attacking. Why the misfire makes it worse. If the first shot came from an officer's negligent handling of Pretti's gun, the supposed threat sound was officer created, not suspect created. That highlights poor weapons handling, bad communication, and failure to control contagious fire. All strong indicators of unreasonable force. Unreasonable force. Pinning him on the ground, firing roughly 10 shots in about 5 seconds into his back after he has been subdued. Frame-by-frame analysis indicates another officer had already removed a handgun from Pretti before the shooting. We saw that. And an officer is later heard saying, "I got the gun," suggesting he may have been unarmed, which he was. Not an immediate threat. The actual Hennepin County medical examiner ruled his death a homicide. And civil rights lawyers described the force used as grossly disproportionate to any danger he posed, which, if proven, would make the shooting an unreasonable seizure under the Fourth Amendment. And then there's the Fifth Amendment, due process. There's just violations everywhere. If federal agents used lethal force against a U.S. citizen who had already been disarmed and restrained without any imminent threat, that would amount to a deprivation of life without due process of law. Okay? And then the government comes out with this rapid public labeling of Pretti as a domestic terrorist or assassin, despite contradictory video evidence as evidence of potential bad faith and an attempt to justify an otherwise unconstitutional killing. He also had his the Eighth Amendment, his right to not be subjected to cruel, unusual punishment was violated. Okay? Cruel, unusual punishment. When state actors repeatedly use lethal force as de facto punishment, it raises serious Eighth Amendment concerns and supports a broader reading of the clause. Because traditionally, Eighth Amendment applies after conviction, but these recent events require a broader reading of the clause. Okay? And then there's the obstruction, cover-up, equal protection concerns. The White House and DHS is being accused of a cover-up regarding the Pretti shooting and the Renee Good shooting, for that matter. But they're withholding information. They're promoting misleading narratives about the threat they posed. Equal protection, the immigration enforcement in Minneapolis has disproportionately targeted particular political groups and communities. That's the argument. And that these protesters are treated more harshly because of their views, not their conduct. That bad again, guys. Because again, doesn't matter what you believe as far as whether or not your right is valid. So I believe that courts will analyze the Alex Pretti shooting under the Fourth Amendment's objective reasonableness, and they're going to use Graham v. Connor. So that's what we're going to see. And it will be interesting to see if anybody actually gets charged, because these federal officers are virtually untouchable. That's why you should stay away from them. They're very dangerous, very dangerous. But he was seized. They definitely seized him. They restrained him. They pinned him to the ground. That qualifies as a seizure. So, again, he was just filming him. Okay, doesn't matter what he said. Doesn't matter if somebody blew a whistle. He was filming. Qualified immunity. Officers can be civilly liable only if they violated a clearly established constitutional right. Cases denying immunity often involve force used against people who are already disarmed, subdued, or non-threatening, which is the case with Pretti. Clearly established law and totality. Appellate courts have held that gratuitous force after a suspect is incapacitated is unconstitutional. Shooting a disarmed, pinned person because of a team-generated negligent discharge fits the kind of conduct those cases condemn. Bottom line, under a full totality of circumstances analyses, the negligent discharge and contagious fire sequence increases, not decreases, the appearance of negligent and constitutional violation. The quote-unquote misfire narrative doesn't relieve pressure on the agents. It underscores serious training and judgment failures. Key takeaways. Graham v. Connor requires holistic evaluation, not a split-second excuse. Video evidence and the Sig Sauer sequence support claims of negligent discharge and unconstitutional use of force. These facts strengthen rather than weaken potential civil rights claims under the Fourth Amendment. Interesting, right? Interesting. So the evidence shows he was disarmed, restrained, and not attacking when the shots were fired. when it comes to Homeland Security, DHS, and now ICE, TSA, you probably don't want to know where I stand on all that. You know, you got to realize I went through the creation of these things after the false flag of 9/11 and how they shoved the Patriot Act on Americans who had not ever wanted the Patriot Act until we had 9/11. I remember Alex Jones used to call Homeland Security a foreign occupation. And he did that because he was able to show that Homeland Security is Soros funded. It's big bankster funded. And those guys are foreigners. And so we have a problem with all of this extrajudicial law being created. I think it's overall just a big problem. DHS is over these ICE agents. And I actually think that we have a lot of correlation to Bolshevism and the way that Russia created the Bolsheviks, where they just, they deputized criminals basically and created this group of enforcement that was highly dangerous. And I think we could be seeing some of that. I would think it's safe to say probably 2/3 of those guys shouldn't even have a badge and a uniform. They should not be out there on the streets conducting these things. They're obviously untrained and ill-equipped to handle this stuff. That guy shoving that woman to the ground, he completely escalated. And Pretti went to see if she was okay to pick her up off the ground, but he put himself between her and him, but he had his back to the agent, and the ICE agents just went off on him and pulled him into the scrum. Again, it sounds like a, ma'am, put your hands behind your back. That's what an arrest looks like, not the chaos that those guys fomented. If you were to go and listen to a civil rights lawyer, they would shred this all day from having been anything good with regards to ICE. And they will show you that this man's rights were violated all day, every day. I just can't understand how people don't see that. But I do know that exists and that it's prevalent in the conservative movement, where we just back the blue no matter what. But we've had a serious problem with police abuse through the years, and that's been documented heavily by a lot of people. And when we say there's a few good cops, that's a problem, because there's a few. And that's a whole nother video, I suppose. But these ICE agents are out of control. They're unhinged, and they need to be leashed. And that's why we had some 20,000 people hit the streets after Pretti was killed, because they know inherently that was wrong. Even if they're leftist, befuddled individuals that don't understand the truth of Christ, for one, or just the basic tenets of thought that, I don't know, someone can't be a cat just because they say they are. But isn't it interesting that even they can see that shooting was bad? But what we have here is an event that's going to be used to further splinter the nation. And of course, it's been pounced on by the left to uphold. The left is now sainting this guy. They're worshiping this guy. People are out there weeping for him as if they knew him all their life. It's just really sad to see that we can't just have someone come out and make a clear-cut case and just stand on the principles of freedom and liberty. The right has been, at least those in authority have been spinning a yarn from the beginning, trying to lie about the matter, but the video doesn't lie. And the video shows us he was there, he was just filming, and then he walked away. They pushed the woman, he went to help her, and because he was between her and the agent, they grabbed him. They mace him immediately, then they grab him, throw him on the ground, disarm him, and then they kill him. Okay, that's not good. Guys, it's not good at all. We've been going for a while here. I guess before we end, if you're still hanging in there with me, we're going to listen to one of the best civil rights lawyers in the country talk about this. And he's being interviewed by the civil rights lawyer, YouTube channel, The Civil Rights Lawyer, John, and I forget his last name just now, but and I think it's pretty good. But I think that this could have been avoided. I really do. Let's go ahead and look at that. So this is John. He's the civil rights lawyer. That's the name of his YouTube channel. An awesome guy, man. And I encourage you to go and consume some of his content. He really gets after it, and he exposes a lot of heinous crimes by law enforcement. And then this is Patrick Giacomo, and he's going to talk about this. And they've been talking about the actual events, but he's going to go through another aspect here, and I think you'll appreciate it.
You go into that some, and the fact that they're operating with a total, I mean, it's one thing to say, all right, they're enforcing the law. We don't armchair quarterback decisions by law enforcement officers that have to be made very, very quickly, split-second decisions and all that. We can't always judge them in 20/20 hindsight. I mean, it's one thing to acknowledge that, but it's another thing to say we're not going to judge them in any way at all. If the feds don't want to do anything internally to their own employees, sorry, there's nothing that can be done at all. You cannot sue these people, and the state and local authorities cannot even prosecute those people criminally. I mean, there's zero accountability for whatever these guys do, and it seems like they know that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's several things I want to start with before we get into that, and now we're kind of zooming out to the bigger problem, I think. And so to start with, I think you're right. I mean, the federal government's not going to hold them accountable, and I think the statements that we've seen from people like Greg Bovino and Kristi Noem show that this is behavior that they want to encourage. I don't see any other way to interpret the fact that every time something at least questionable has happened, the immediate response before any evidence has actually been sussed out is for the government to come out immediately and full-throatedly supporting their officers and completely and totally treating as villains, calling terrorists or agitators or whatever the people who've been killed. And so I think the incentive structure is pretty clear for federal agents. And of course, the bigger problem is the lack of accountability. And I'd also say that as someone who grew up in a conservative Republican household and came to sort of the lowercase L libertarian position that he's at today from that perspective, it is very shocking to see people from that milieu now cheering the idea of groups of masked, armed federal agents patrolling the United States for any reason. This was historically a boogeyman of the right, and correctly so, because you had instances like Ruby Ridge and Waco, and you had rightful concerns about the things that those bands of federal agents might be doing. This is something that violates concepts of federalism, and it, of course, is something that could lead to the violation of Americans' rights. And now, unfortunately, because the armed federal agents are roaming around doing something that people on the right may like to one degree or another, there's a lot more excuse making for something that on principle should simply be rejected as something that would be anathema to our founding fathers.
Yeah.
In terms of holding them accountable, yes, this is really where I think the rubber meets the road. And so a few years ago, in a case that we litigated at the Institute for Justice called Bird versus Lamb, you had a conservative judge, Don Willett, in the Fifth Circuit, a conservative circuit, lamenting the fact that federal officers act in what he referred to as a constitution-free zone because there's nothing that can really be done to hold them accountable when they violate the Constitution. And you touched on several of those reasons, but I want to go through them to show to people just how completely insulated federal officers are. And one is, okay, well, maybe we can hold them accountable by charging them with crimes when they really act badly. So let's take this scenario and change it to be one where this officer is on video saying, hey, I'm going to go over there and murder this man, and then goes over and murders the man. So it's just as clean as it could be. There's no, disputes about what happened. Even under those circumstances, you're now left with a situation where state prosecutors, like you said, generally have a very hard time suing federal officers if their actions are taken pursuant to their federal duties. This stems from a case from the Supreme Court in the 1800s called In re Nagel, where a U.S. Marshal killed a man who was trying to assassinate one of the justices of the Supreme Court who recused from the decision in the case. And the Supreme Court basically said the Supremacy Clause means that, at least under some circumstances, state prosecutors cannot charge federal agents with crimes for conducting actions that are, quote, necessary and proper to their federal duties. And of course, there is some logic to this. We don't want to essentially allow states to make federal operations de facto illegal by simply arresting every federal officer who tries to engage in what is otherwise lawful behavior. I think that the Nagel decision has been read very lazily over the past century by the lower courts, and the Supreme Court has done very little to sort of rein it in. And so you see essentially the rule being applied is that if someone's a federal officer, they can't be charged with a state crime. That's not actually true. I don't think that's true under Nagel. I think there are also exceptions that need to be made for Nagel. And one of them would be if an officer is violating the Constitution, the Supremacy Clause shouldn't protect him. But as the law stands today, it's extremely difficult, bordering on impossible, for state prosecutors to charge federal officers with crimes when the crime is committed pursuant to actions taken in the line of their federal duties. That leaves us with federal prosecutors who can, of course, prosecute federal agents. There's a statute, 18 U.S.C. 242, that actually makes it a crime, and the crime is capital if the victim dies, for a federal agent to violate someone's constitutional rights willfully. And the willfulness standard is basically the clearly established standard from qualified immunity. This is a statute that has been in place longer than the Department of Justice has existed. This is a Reconstruction statute alongside Section 1983. But the glaring conflict of interest, which of course is federal officials charging other federal officials with crimes, means that this statute is almost never used against federal officers. It's rarely even used against state and local officers. And so the big takeaway in terms of the one large way we could see accountability, which is prosecutions, is that prosecutors either cannot or will not prosecute federal officers when they break the law or when they violate your constitutional rights. And then that leaves it to us, the American people, to enforce our own rights. And I think that is a good system if it had the appropriate tools. But over the past few decades, the American people's arms have been tied when it comes to doing this, because while you used to be able to broadly sue federal officers when they violated the Constitution under what's called a Bivens cause of action, a few years ago in a case called Egbert versus Boulay, the Supreme Court took that away from us. And certainly whatever's left, it does not cover immigration officers, because the Egbert case was a Border Patrol case, and the court explained that one of the reasons why you couldn't bring a Bivens cause of action was because of that context. And so then that leaves us just with these sort of oblique, more novel ways of trying to get at constitutional accountability indirectly. And so the main one is a statute called the Federal Tort Claims Act.
Okay, so he's going to talk about how you can actually bring charges against a federal officer through tort claim, and what happens is it goes to the government, and they can give you damages for harms instead of for having your constitutional rights violated. It's not called that. It's just called you've been harmed. And anyway, so that's one of the loopholes there. But we definitely need to see more prosecution of federal officers who violate constitutional law, who violate people's rights. We need to see that, and that would be a good thing. And it doesn't mean that we're against rounding up illegal immigrants, or that we are now all of a sudden have embraced leftist ideology, but instead it's someone who's just standing for individual rights, and that's okay. That's okay. I love this country. I love America, and I believe that the principles upon which she has been founded are biblical, and that we have seen for the first time in the history of the world a place where freedom is lifted up. And it's been a freedom experiment, right? And it's a great thing, and we ought to be passionate about speaking out against those who violate those rights, no matter who the individual might be. And so that's called being consistent, But I'm patriot. I love liberty. In fact, look what I got. I have an eagle. That means I'm patriotic. How many of you watch Stale Cracker? That is a great channel. He cooks Cajun food, and I love it. But he sells these freedom birds. So I invite, if you have a beverage, you can join me, because I'm going to prove that I'm an American. Take this freedom bird here, and you put your favorite beverage in it. I don't know what you like. I'm one of those beer snobs. I like microbrews, especially IPA. But then you just take your bird and do like this right here. Proof that I am an American. You know it. But I just got a message. I want to read you. And we'll finish up. You can go about your day, go about your even. And this is from a friend of mine who is an ex-FBI agent. He's also a really solid Reformed Christian. And I asked him, what's your take on the Pretti shooting? He says, oh, come on, man. Coming at me with the easy question, or he gave me a very simple question, but there's just no other way the answer can be equally simple. So here's what he said. To start with, when it comes to shootings like this, similar to the ICE incident with the woman who was said to be trying to run over an agent, which in my opinion feels like a pretty gross overstatement, it's hard for me to have a rock solid 100% opinion without actually being on the ground myself. There's something I learned back when I was in law enforcement. There can be a massive difference between what shows up on a cell phone video and what an officer is perceiving in real time from their own vantage point and mental state. That said, if we set aside ICE more broadly and some of what I personally see as disturbing levels of unprofessionalism and thug-like behavior, and focus specifically on the Border Patrol shooting of Alex Pretti, then based on what I've read and what I've seen on video, it looks about 99.9% a very bad shoot. In other words, not justified. I don't buy the claim that agents saw a gun in his hand while he was standing. If that were true, they never would have approached him in the way they did or laid hands on him in that manner. What we can't clearly see is what happened once he was pinned on the ground. It's possible he reached toward a firearm at that point. Another possibility is that he didn't reach for it at all, but if he was carrying at the small of his back, that's exactly where officers naturally move someone's wrists during handcuffing. A truly tragic and absurd scenario would be agents wrestling him, moving his hands back to cuff him, while another agent sees hands near a firearm and fires, killing him. Part of what makes the situation so hard to swallow is the sheer number of agents on top of him. It's difficult to understand how one agent could perceive the situation as so out of control that deadly force was necessary, especially when doing so meant risking shooting fellow officers while the person was face down on the ground. All that said, while the FBI certainly doesn't have a spotless history, I honestly can't remember the last time I saw FBI agents behaving like common criminals, acting as though a badge gives them license to assault people who aren't posing a threat to officers themselves or anyone else. By contrast, I've seen multiple videos of ICE and Border Patrol agents walking up to people and violently shoving them to the ground. That's deeply unsettling. It's a scary day when those who operate above or outside the law and seem to resent the people they police are the ones enforcing it. There's no universe where a civilian could walk up to a law enforcement officer, shove him violently, and not be facing prison time. Yet today, whether someone is an illegal immigrant or not, these agencies seem remarkably comfortable doing exactly to civilians. One video I saw showed protesters who weren't rioting, weren't damaging property, and weren't hurting anyone, all on their knees, while an ICE agent casually walked along and pepperballed them in the face. That's unreal. That's the kind of thing you expect to read about in history books or see happening in other countries, not in current U.S. news. At the same time, I treat all information with caution. Between deep fakes, selective editing, and the sheer amount of narrative spinning today, it's genuinely hard to know what to trust. Technology can make anyone appear to say or do almost anything. From a conspiracy theory standpoint, it's the perfect environment for corruption. If people stop believing anything they see or hear, you could show them the truth, no matter how horrific, and no one would react. Strangely enough, the opposite is also true. People can end up believing everything at once. That's a recipe for chaos, rioting, and anarchy based on things that may not have even happened. I could definitely keep going, but I'll stop there for now. Sound words. I will add this. William J. Casey, a lawyer and once director of Central Intelligence, made this quote. "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the U.S. public believes is false." All the world is a stage, my friend. And this thing could go further and deeper than none of us may even imagine. But just from first blush, that was a bad shoot. God bless you, friends, family. I pray all the best for you, and just appreciate you watching this live or later on the recording. Thank you, and I will see you on the next one. We're going to keep trying. A little tidbit I've been working on for months, a dissertation on kinism, and I'm very excited to bring that out. It's going to be really cool, very vibrant, professional, and it's going to shred this false position called kinism. It's found in Christian circles, and it has to do with upholding your kin over other people's kin. And so from first glance, it can actually have a lot of things that seem valid, and they use a lot of scripture. And I've been very excited to dig into this, and it's going deep. I've put a lot of research into this, and I think you're going to enjoy it. But that's coming up. And then, of course, the podcast itself, we can get everybody on track, on the same page. Roundtable Media involves other people, so that we can bounce ideas and have a dialogue that is enjoyable for you, the audience, to listen to, not just me talking, but others. And I think it's going to be really good once we get consistent with it. But I appreciate your support, appreciate all your comments for or against. Keep it coming. I'll see you on the